Alright, here's a video that I've kind of wanted to do lately because of the whole fake news thing that's been going around lately, where if people hear something that they just don't like or don't agree with, like, fake news, I don't believe it. So there's a thing called cognitive dissonance, and what this meme says is, this is why people get upset when their beliefs are challenged. A mental conflict occurs when beliefs are contradicted by new information. This conflict activates areas of the brain involved in personal identity and emotional response to threats. The brain's alarms go off when a person feels threatened on a deeply personal and emotional level, causing them to shut down and disregard any rational evidence that contradicts what they previously regarded as truth. And I see this happen all the time lately, and I've seen it happen a lot in my personal life, prior to the whole fake news thing too. I mean, I've actually been dealing with it for most of my life to one degree or another, and I've had it happen to me, and it's not fun. For whatever reason, my brain tends to be a little bit more fluid than other people's. Like, I love to learn, and I learn all the time, and I'm not afraid to hear conflicting information. Like, if I see something that kind of challenges my beliefs, I'll actually go towards it rather than run away. Like, I want to hear it. But I wanted to share a couple of real world examples, like 4 primary examples, because I've got dozens of them, but the 4 that really stuck out for me. The first one happened when I was probably 13 years old. I think I was just going into high school, and being a teenager, fighting with my parents a lot. Like, every single morning, my parents and I would get in a fight. And they were the ones starting it, but they would blame it on me and say that I'm an asshole and I'm starting fights and I just am impossible to get along with. And I was like, I'm the one that's trying to de-escalate. Like, every time I'm like, let's not fight. Let's just have a good morning. And they would never believe me. They would just gang up on me. 2 to 1. They're older than me. They're bigger than me. There's not much I can do about it. And also, just based on what they were telling me, like, it was kind of gaslighting, because I was like, well, maybe it is me. Like, they seem really convinced. So I had a friend that had a little mini tape recorder. He was actually trying to start like a rap group in Seward, Alaska, which is pretty funny, but he was really talented. So he had this little mini tape recorder, and I said, hey, can I borrow that tape recorder for a couple days? And I ended up borrowing it for 4 days. And every morning I would record the beginning of the fights, because I would know, I could sense when the tension was building. I was like, a fight's about to break out. And I would take out the tape recorder, hold it under the table, and, try to de-escalate. Be like, let's not fight. Let's just have a morning where we don't fight. Everything's fine. And they'd scream at me and tell me what an asshole I am and how bad of a person I am. And I'd tape recorded the whole thing. And then at the end of the fight, when things kind of mellowed out a little bit, I played it back for my parents and said, listen to you guys, listen to me, and then listen to you guys. And their thought process is, I'm a 13-year-old kid living in Seward, Alaska. They thought I doctored the tape somehow. I mean, we had just gotten in this fight like a half hour ago. They should have remembered the things they actually said, but apparently they were so angry and so upset they didn't even remember the words that came out of their mouth, even when it was played back to them. So I'm just sitting there like, holy shit, this still didn't work. Like, it didn't do anything. They just assumed I was tricking them somehow. So I just gave up, gave the tape player back to my friend, and was like, hey, thanks, I tried. So the next time it came up, me and a friend were watching the news, and it was shortly after 9/11, sitting in his house, and he just all of a sudden blurts out, he's like, they need to just bomb the Middle East to glass. And he's a very religious person. And I'm like, really? You want to bomb the Middle East, the Holy Land? Like, holy crap. And he's like, those Muslims, they're just horrible. They treat women terrible. Like, they don't let women drive and they have to cover their hair. It's just awful. And I said, well, you know where they got that, right? Like, they got that in the Bible. Like, that's where it came from. And he's like, no, the Bible's all peaceful and the Bible loves women and cherishes women. I was like, have you read the Bible? So I went and got a Bible off of his bookshelf and brought it over, his Bible, his bookshelf, his house, brought it over to him, opened up to the chapter and verse. It was 1 Timothy, a verse about, women should not hold a position of authority over a man. They should not speak in church. And then I showed him another verse where women are supposed to keep their head covered, which is why Catholic nuns have their head covered. And he refused to even look at his own Bible. Like, when a kid, you're trying to feed them like spinach or asparagus or something and they just look away? I'm like, nope, not going to eat it. That's what he did with the Bible. He thought if he didn't look at it, then it didn't exist. I mean, I guess. I don't know what was going through his mind, honestly, but all I know is he wouldn't even look at it. And if I moved the verse in front of him to make him look at it, it'd look away again. And I was like, that is the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. And so that was a really weird one. And then a couple of years later, I had moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and I was going hiking with a friend and his wife, and I'd been there for a few months, and he had born and raised there, lived there forever. And we were doing this hike, and we came to the bottom of a mountain, and I looked up at it, and I said, I'm going to climb O'Malley Peak, like as soon as the snow melts. And he goes, well, that's not O'Malley Peak, that's Wolverine Peak. And I was like, no, that's O'Malley Peak. And his wife even said, she goes, oh, I'd trust Chris. Like, he's the mountaineer. He would know. And he's like, no, I was born and raised here. I know my mountains. So I ended up pulling out my trail guide that I bought at the local bookstore and showed him. And I said, here's the road we drove in on. Here's the trailhead that you parked at, because he was the one who drove, because he knew his way around the town. And here's the trail we hiked on, and there's the mountain. And he goes, give me that book. And he looks at it, and he goes, who's this person? I've never heard of this person that wrote this book. They didn't grow up here. They don't know. So I was like, okay, maybe they're wrong. I guess it's possible. I mean, it's got to get through an editor and everything. So I pulled out my topo map that I had bought when I moved here to Anchorage as well. And it's a USGS, like United States Geological Survey map, topo map. And I think the Coast Guard also got in on it a little bit. And same thing. I said, okay, there's the road we drove in on. There's the trailhead you parked at. There's the trail that we're on. This is where we're at in the trail. There's the mountain, O'Malley Peak. And he just sat there and stared at the map for 20 or 30 seconds. And this was the first kind of cognitive dissonance issue where I didn't really have any stakes in it. If he didn't want to believe me, that's fine. It's not really going to hurt anything. So I'm just looking at him, watching his gears turn in his head and try and process this. Because I guess he had learned these mountains when he was in first grade. So he was 6 years old. And at the time, he was 42, I think. So almost over 3 decades, almost his entire life, he believed that Wolverine Peak and O'Malley Peak were flip-flopped. And he just couldn't fathom that. And it broke his brain. So a couple weeks later, 3 weeks later, he called me and we were just talking randomly. And he goes, dude, I am still messed up about that. And I just kind of laughed. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, that really messed me up, because now what other things have I thought my entire life that were a lie? And I was like, dang, that's kind of deep. I had never really thought of it that way. At this point, like, I knew what cognitive dissonance was, but I didn't know the terminology. Like, I actually just learned the terminology like 3.5 years ago. Kind of became pertinent in my life to learn. But the last like situation with cognitive dissonance was just crazy. And this happened probably 2 years ago. A friend and I were having a discussion about religion, and it was about God and Allah and Christianity and Islam. And he was telling me that Muslims worship some kind of moon god, and that's why they're always fighting with us. And I said, no, like, I've read the Quran, I've read the Bible. They worship the same God. Like, Allah just means God in Arabic. And he's like, no, that's not true. And so we were actually on Facebook discussing this on Messenger, so I went to the Oxford Dictionary online and got a link for the word Allah and sent it to him. And the definition said, Allah, the God of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And he wouldn't believe it. He's like, nope. I was like, this is the Oxford Dictionary. It's like pretty much the best-selling dictionary in the history of the world. He wouldn't believe it. So I went to Encyclopedia Britannica, looked up Islam, linked the page to him, said, read it and weep, essentially. And he said, nope. He said, the thing about the Oxford Dictionary and Encyclopedia Britannica, they're overrun with Muslims. It's a conspiracy. So I was like, holy crap. So I took a screenshot of my personal Quran that I bought and sent it to him. And he goes, where'd you buy that? I said, Barnes & Noble. And he said, that's not a real Quran. Like, if you had an actual Quran in Arabic, you know, it would not say those things. And I was like, I don't know what to do here. Like, I've sent you 3 concrete facts and you refuse to believe them. So just anecdotally, there was a band that both of us really liked. And there was lyrics in it where they talked about Jewish, Muslim, Protestant. It was part of the lyrics to the song, and I sent that to him just on the off chance that maybe that might pierce the armor coating he had put around his brain. And that wouldn't do it either. He did say, wow, that's really weird that they would say that. I'm like, yeah, isn't it? Like, is it jogging your memory? But no, that didn't work. So in his case, it didn't take like 3 weeks. It took 5 months, I think. I mean, it's on Facebook Messenger, so it's time-stamped. But he got back to me 5 months later and said, okay, you were right. And I said, yeah, no kidding. Like, Jesus, the Oxford Dictionary definition really should have been enough. But it took him 5 months to process that information. It just destroyed his brain. So when I see this fake news stuff, I mean, I get it. Like, it is a thing, and it's a big deal for some people. But when somebody presents, like, hard and fast, factual information, you just have to process it. I know it's difficult, but you have to accept reality. You can't just make up your own reality. So I thought that was really an important issue, and it's kind of a fascinating subject as well. So something I wanted to share. Hope you've enjoyed it. Signing off. Bye.